3rd, 2022. Introduce the members, starting down with Mark.
Mark Rich, board member.
Nelson Gill, board member.
John DeLeo, Chair.
Rick Lyles, Vice Chair.
Mike Hangy, alternate.
Patrick Lyons, alternate.
Okay. And just in case if there's anybody at home or anybody in the audience here for the sketch plan review for Timberland Acres has been withdrawn from the agenda. So if you're here, you don't have to hang around because we're not going to deal with it tonight. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes from the June 1st, 2022 regular meeting and July 6th, 2022 workshop?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item number 3, preliminary plan for major subdivision titled Jesse's Beach Subdivision 2 for applicant RPM Properties LLC and owner Brenda Collins. The proposal is to create an 11-lot major subdivision. The subject property is approximately 27-acre lot, tax map 107, lot 17, located on Garland Road, Jesse's Beach Way in a rural and limited residential shoreland zoning districts. Is there someone here representing the owner?
Steve Salisbury.
Okay, you got the floor, Steve.
Fairly uncomplicated residential subdivision. We're going to propose to ask a waiver. Came to my attention that we have to ask for a waiver if we do not intend to pave the road. We do not intend to apply asphalt to the road surface, so we're going to modify our application to include that. We're still going to add a few more paragraphs to our covenants, and you'll see that before your next meeting. They'll stay substantially the way they are with just a couple of minor modifications. We moved the fire tank to accommodate what the fire department thought would be the best location to service all the lots from one tank location. And that is going to be at the border between lots 10 and 11, about halfway down the road. And I'm still waiting for an answer. TRT asked me if lot 10 is going to have access to the road because they're specifically exempted from the homeowners association, and the owner hasn't gotten back to me yet what his intentions are, whether to grant lot 10 access on the new road or not, because that's intended to be sold to the gravel pit operator next door, which is Caribou Development, a gentleman out of Texas.
I mean, if it's not given access to the road, technically he could turn around and sell it. How would that work if he ended up then turning around and selling it to somebody who wants to build a house there?
Then they couldn't. I mean, that's part of the condition of the sale is he not use the road. He has his own access road for his trucks and stuff. And he only bought it to buffer and expand and buffer his gravel pit operation.
So the sale already took place?
I'm sorry?
The sale already took place?
It has not.
It is not.
No, we have to modify the subdivision first. Because all this property, care development, and another parcel were originally part of a 3-lot subdivision. So I can't do anything until I modify a plan.
I guess I'm still a little confused on lot 10. I mean, if it's not really part of the subdivision.
Oh, it is. It definitely is part of the subdivision. It may not have all the amenities of the subdivision.
Any questions from the board?
Just to clarify, none of these roads between the subdivision all the way out to the state road are private, and there's easements and all that kind of good stuff in or covenants rather, for the subdivision that gives them the right of passage or whatever.
Correct.
Okay, I thought I saw that someplace in a note, but
Yep.
just wanted to clarify.
Normally, I mean, Steve brought up the fact that he's asking for a waiver from it being paved. I mean, normally you would ask for a road in a subdivision to be paved, but all the roads up there are gravel. And maybe the entrance to Garland Road might be paved a little bit in, but
That's just a
all the
little.
other roads, because there's another road that kind of heads down the shoreline. I mean, everything up there is a gravel road, so I mean, it won't make any sense to require that this be paved.
I think the idea of the pave came out of the fire prevention ordinance, section where it says that all paved, a paved all-weather surface. So the idea of a waiver would have to come from the fire chief and not from this board. We can't grant a waiver from the fire prevention ordinance.
Well, so I don't have chapter 4 with me,
Right.
but I know it speaks about residential and commercial differently. So.
Well, I'm looking at, Elena, I'm looking at the letter from the fire inspector under point 3, projects will meet the requirements of chapter 4, 3-point fire apparatus access roads, subject to 1A commercial, industrial developments, and multiple family subdivisions, et cetera, shall have a paved all-weather driving surface as follows in compliance with the ordinance, chapter 6, Unified Development Ordinance, chapter, or a waiver may be applied for this project. So if it's in chapter 4,
And it refers back to chapter 56?
correct, so you have to have, the chief has to be able to say no or give that waiver. I went, we've gone through this before, as far as, and we granted a waiver on the fire prevention ordinance, and I don't believe we have the purview to do that.
No, you don't. I guess, I mean, I don't think you need to decide tonight either. It certainly makes it easier if you do, for Steve's sake. But I guess we'll have to look at it and catch up, or return to it after you finish your discussion if we find something.
Looks like you cut an ordinance there.
He's got it online.
So
Yeah, I have it on my phone.
you're good.
This is a single and potentially duplex, I suppose, single-family residential subdivision, not a apartment or townhouse subdivision.
So you're saying that the waiver from the chief is only necessary if it's multifamily?
That's.
And this is single-family detached, basically?
Right. This, yeah, my understanding was, and, seeing it again, is that that's kind of the distinction between commercial, industrial, and then like apartment buildings being somewhat commercial in nature, right? Versus a land subdivision for single, two-family. So it's two separate subsections in there. And the commercial, industrial, and multifamily buildings, it says paved, bold, underline, all-weather driving surface, whereas the single and duplex family residential subdivision says shall have an all-weather driving surface, which I believe can be gravel. But it doesn't, does that, some of the minimum width things come into play there, but we have minimum
Yeah,
widths depending on street types.
I think this
In
is
Article
something that
9.
probably get discussed in a meeting outside of this.
Yeah.
Because it's, the question I come up with is who's the more stricter? And then who has precedence over who? Is it chapter 56 or is it chapter 4?
Right. And there shouldn't be too much difference between who's stricter.
Right.
There might be some nuance there, but, I mean, we work that out at TRT usually. I think there have been many land subdivisions that have not had paved roads, if they're small enough. The criteria for your waiver is if it's under 100 ADT and in the rural area. And private.
Well, I would just suggest that staff research it so we know exactly,
Yeah, we
because I
can,
don't think there's a problem with the board granting the waiver. I guess it's just a matter of
Who does?
Who gets to do it?
who does it.
And this is only preliminary, so.
Yeah,
there-
yeah.
There's a,
But let's,
there's a time increment in which to resolve it.
yeah, we can, probably provide a memo that addresses that topic specifically.
Steve, one thing I noticed, there's no, as far as I know, there's no letter of financial capability. Can you provide something along that line?
I will,
Okay.
yes.
And, that's needed now, but, during your, TRT, there was some discussion that, the board consider conditions of approval requiring that development within a subdivision be limited to typical residential, low-risk commercial uses. But I noticed in your, in the HOA agreement that, I mean, you're restricting it all to residential, then you're not allowing any commercial.
Yeah.
So I
and
suspect that we would include that restriction on the plan itself.
I've put it on the plan
Yep.
already, it's already,
Oh, it's already-
under your signature block, there's a condition written in there, so the city has enforcement powers.
Okay.
Steve, I had a question for you. In the fire department letter on item 2, it says the site map provides correct T-turns as shown. Should that say cul-de-sac instead of a T-turn? Or are you providing T-turn?
No, we're providing a cul-de-sac.
Okay, so that should say a T-turn rather than a cul-de-sac. Okay.
Should say cul-de-sac.
Rather than teacher.
I think they just inadvertently put T-turn in there.
Yeah, okay.
Our intention's always been to have a cul-de-sac.
It appears from Tom that you're all set with what the plans are for fire prevention.
Yep,
Or
they're
fire-
offering to do a 20,000 gallon cistern in the middle, right by lot 10, so that should be more than sufficient for the size homes that they're looking to put up in there.
And removing the first one from.
Yes.
Yeah, taking that off.
There will only be one cistern. You'll see on your map, they forgot to take the original one off down in the other.
Yeah, okay,
So-
down by lot 11.
Yeah,
corner lot 11.
where it says Garland Road, where it says fire tank, that's the new
Right.
location, that's where it's gonna be going.
The little Garland Road goes across a wetland area. What do they need to do to take care of that, if anything?
It's a pretty small area, even under.
By lot 2, is that what you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty insignificant. It's only a few hundred square feet.
So no regulation kicks in then, is
I
that?
think there's not even a permit with that.
No, the
Size.
first 4,000 square feet are exempt.
That's the answer to the question then.
Any other questions from the board?
I'm good.
And I'll open it up to
Does the staff have any other concerns, anything we haven't discussed?
No, most things have been addressed or are forthcoming, so just about everything for preliminary has been provided.
All right, I'll open up the public hearing. If anybody in the audience has a comment or question, please come up to the podium and state your name. Come up to the podium, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, listen, younger men always do that.
Hi, Jeff Harrison. I'm one of the abutters there. I just had a question on lots 2 and 3. They don't quite appear to conform to the length to width ratio of 1 to 3 for a shorefront lot, or maybe it's just close enough. It's hard to tell at the scale.
Could
So
you
it's
say
just-
that again, please?
I was questioning whether lots 2 and 3, they appear to not quite conform to the length to width ratios for a subdivision like this.
Do you have an answer for that, Elena?
That's a astute point. I think you'll see where, I believe that's in your criteria and standards, when it's time to make sure that conforms. So Steve and I can take a look at that.
And the only other concern was, being in a butter, I know the property well. It's a sand esker on top of a clay bed, and I just wonder if there's any special precautions that need to be done ahead of time to make sure the septic systems don't overly leach water on top of the clay and out into the lake. Because if you walk along the beach line now at low water like it is, you can just see the water after every rain pouring right out of the clay into the lake. So there's not a lot of retention, the way that the geology is there. So, it's nothing that's going to stop anything. I think it's just that, going in ahead of time, knowing that, the geology is prone towards that runoff on top of the clay, that maybe something about the septic systems being a little bit more conservative might be in order. I'm not a sanitary engineer, so I don't know, but I'm just asking the question.
Laura, you deal with septic, you have,
Yep.
can you answer the gentleman?
When, I can't answer about that specifically, but there are licensed site evaluators that will be doing the sampling of the soils and then design from that point.
Right, I guess my point is though that, this may not be a normal situation where normal is quite good enough given the way that the water runs off. Maybe it is, but,
They have to be 100 feet back.
yeah.
And there are test bits that have been done with
Okay,
some
that's it.
information provided.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, folks, I'm Don Burrell. I own all the property on the north side of Garland Road, except what part Pete, Mr. Harrison owns. Anyway, my issues are, one, the right-of-ways in Garland Road have been clouded from day one. I got $68,000 invested in that. I just want to mention that. The other thing that I'd like to mention is concerns health safety, I think, long enough. Granted, the city of Ellsworth has no interest in the roads there, and the fact, except for the fact of the matter is, the density is now getting fairly heavy down there, and can the city ignore forever and a day the health safety issues of the condition of the road and whatever? Now, the Peninsula Road Association have been good folks over the years to keep the Garland Road in fair shape. In fact, they just invested a fair amount of money into that, in the thousands. So now, we're gonna have a subdivision down the end of the thing. The fire department would like to have some health safety issues down there to make sure that that's in the long run, if there's not at some point, because these things don't happen just with the Garland Road, they'll happen with other roads in Ellsworth and other communities around here, where the density gets so heavy, even though, if I'm making myself clear, the city of Ellsworth has no responsibility in the care of the road, should there not, for the benefit of all and health and safety, should there not be some provision for the care of the roads leading down there? Now, I understand the city of Ellsworth could say, well, wait a minute, these are not city roads, why should we be? But if Ellsworth has a health safety consciousness, should it not be an issue? If the road isn't plowed by the association hypothetically, and somebody in the new subdivision, or one of my properties, or whatever the case may be, is in need of some assistance, and they can't get there because the road is plugged with snow, I guess my question is a hypothetical one. Is the city of Ellsworth able to just wash their hands and say, we have no issue with all of this?
Like I said, I mean, as far as, you're right, I mean, it's a private road, as far as the
Yeah,
city.
but I'm just saying, from a practical point of view, citizenry who is paying their taxes to the, just like I do, to the city of Ellsworth, there are no benefits from the city, health, safety-wise, to access to the residents. Now, I know this isn't brought up every time, but now we're getting to an issue where I have a bunch of lots in that area. A man from Naples here has another bunch of interest in the thing. You got all the folks on Peninsula Road. Now the density's getting pretty heavy down there. So my question to you is, not to make this man's life miserable was putting a subdivision in, because he's entitled to do that, and he's entitled to benefit from whatever that. But at some point, do all of us have some moral obligation to the citizenry who live in the Garland Road all the way down? Now, the other point comes down to, I don't know what issue this comes down to, is Peninsula Road primarily is in Mariahville.
Correct.
Yeah. So you can tell me, thank you very much, Mr. Burrell, it was nice to hear from you, but there
Well,
are
let me
some
just-
health
let me-
huh?
let me Just ask Steve one thing, if you could explain a little, your subdivision is coming in from Route 180 on the Garland Road. I mean, to what extent will this subdivision contribute to the upkeep of at least that part of the road that Mr. Burrell is concerned
I don't know if I
with? Is there,
owns part of it, my association would take care of it just to benefit themselves, if nothing else.
I mean, is there any agreement from your subdivision? I mean, there's probably, what, 4 different subdivisions up
There's
there?
at least 3 subdivisions there. This developer did one 25 years ago, further on Garland Road, Peninsula Drive. on the South Shore.
That was Casper Sargent that did that. But the point comes down to is, again, if I'm allowed to correspond back on that, the mere fact of the matter is that a developer, no matter what, even in some instances, cities require betterments to be put into streets, even though the situation there's no hookup to water and sewer in a particular place. I'm just using that as an example. But if each of us go ahead and do our work, asking for subdivisions, and I probably will be before you at some point in the future looking for at least a minor subdivision down there. The question comes down to, is it just that we can go on and do that and have no cause for the future to make sure that what if they don't create a subdivision a subdivision association or an owners association to help with the care of the road? Suppose they choose not to do that. Is that the city's, I don't know the answer to this, I'm not trying to be a smart guy. Is this the city's obligation as these major situations present themselves? And it's more from a health safety. Now, sure, on a day in and day out, it's nice to travel over a gravel road that's smooth and good one. But if you've got a bunch of folks now moving into the road's gonna take more wear and tear. Even though it's not a city road. And it comes back to health safety.
Considering it's a private road, that, I mean, our ordinances can't
Huh?
force, we can't force Mr. Salisbury to improve your section of the road.
But if it was a city road, it would be different, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I question, again, not from a point of view of law, but from a point of view of health safety.
Well, that's why that's why the cul-de-sacs are there, for example, on the road, is from a health safety
Well,
perspective.
I totally agree with you. I think the cul-de-sac's a wonderful idea, and it's all required in every community under God's green earth to do those kind of things. The question comes down to, it's not just about turning the fire truck around. If the fire truck can't get there, if the ambulance can't get there, are you telling me that's a non-issue?
We can only prescribe what we can prescribe. I mean, there are limits about what we can do and not do.
But Garland Road is not going to be the only one you're going to face this situation on in the long,
Absolutely.
long haul. The point is, it does not benefit, and I'm not trying to be a do-gooder here. I'm just saying, from the point of view, now we're talking about a lot of folks. And I contribute to some of that, I agree. I pay my share of maintaining the Peninsula Road Association, even though I'm in the city of Ellsworth.
I would say, I mean, people that live out there, it's in their best interest to keep the road passable for police and fire.
Do you ever
correct?
get 26 people who agree on anything?
Understand, Mr. Burrow.
I'm not trying to be a smart guy, I'm just saying that at some point, cities need to make provision with this. Now, you're gonna wave off and you're gonna say, fine, it doesn't fall in our purview. But is the city of Ellsworth better off?
That's more of a question for the city council.
I hear you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Okay. Is there anybody else? And I will close the public hearing. Is there any other questions from the board?
Would you like me to address that a bit?
Yes, certainly.
Because it's a very good point and something that I've been thinking about in several contexts and have brought up in different ways. And I think there are, first of all, we have design standards for roads, even private ones. So that's part of my attention to that. Part of my attention to the fact that it all goes on to a state-owned road and has happened incrementally over time without probably a lot of oversight, which is not good planning. It's also part of my attention to the question of what are the rights to this property, because the person who sold it to the new owner who's before you tonight was married into the family that the road is named after. So it probably is true that there's not a lot of clarity in those rights. So the board does need to look at right title and interest to develop property to some extent. Doesn't necessarily need to go way down the rabbit hole, but that burden is also on the applicant to show us that they have that. Then we do, I would encourage you to look through the subdivision ordinance with those comments in mind, because one of the things that's required before final approval is showing us your bylaws for your proposed homeowners association, how they're going to maintain things, and it talks about covenants for mandatory membership in that association being provided and reviewed by the board, and even included in the deed. So I think a lot of it is in there. And to the bigger citywide question, I worked somewhere else where you needed frontage on a public street in order to start a subdivision, or you would have had to get everybody else on board with making the application. And basically, frontage on private roads didn't really count for those purposes. It's a different place with more density, different situation. But long-term, there's so much land in Ellsworth, so many private roads. If you continue that branching forever off of old camp roads and whatnot, it is gonna create problems and already has in other places too, so.
Part of RTIs, they have to show that they have the right to travel over the Garland Road to get to the property, right?
Is there a homeowners association for the beginning of this road?
I'm not sure.
Who's taking care of that road? So are we expecting these 10 lots to take care of the entire road?
I could answer that. On the Garland Road,
Could you come back up just so?
Come back up here a minute.
Please, thank you.
yeah, Jeff Harrison. So along the Garland Road, there's really nobody doing anything together to maintain the Garland Road. We sort of freeload off of the Peninsula Drive Road Association, who take care of the whole long road and don't consider it too bad of a burden to just add that little bit of Garland Road into what they're doing. We did have some problems, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I forget which winter it was, with some ice storms creating really bad access into the road. But since that experience, the Peninsula Drive Association has been much more aggressive in maintaining the plowing, especially during ice storms, because of that one bad year we had where people were really having a hard time getting in and out because of the ice. But Peninsula Drive Association, they really stepped up and they're really active and they've done a lot on the road, and they just re-crowned it and added in a different kind of soil on top that doesn't washboard as much. So they've been doing a lot on Garland Road and all of their.
Thank you.
So, do you make any, I'm sorry, do you make any contributions to that, to what Peninsula Drive?
I contribute labor. So I'm friends with the guys down the road and I got my own backhoe.
But it's very informal then?
Yes, everything's just a wink and a nod and a handshake.
Cool.
The main way.
Come back up,
Am I recognized again?
certainly.
Again, to the lady's point of view, Garland Road right away by Brenda Collins and Jesse Garland is clouded on the right of ways. Cost me $67,000 in that thing. Also, the survey lines were tampered with. We had Mr. Harrison and myself had quite a go over that. So there's some issues down there, not this man's fault. Let's get back to the road again. I'm an active member of the association with dollars. I own the major part of the property on the north side of that road. That road doesn't stay good by itself, not with the traffic that's going over it. It has to be maintained. As Mr. Harrison just said, and I said to you earlier, the Peninsula Road Association has taken care of the Garland Road for years and has done a great job clearing the brush off the side of it, doing the culverts. The road is all culverted because, as you said earlier, it's a wetlands type of situation, and so forth and so on. And you just can't turn your back on that type of stuff. Oh, yeah, I got a dog in the fight, sure I do. I don't know whether you folks think I'm out of order or what. But you just can't turn your back on that type of stuff. The mere fact that the Peninsula Road Association, even though the association itself doesn't own any property, particularly on Jesse's Landing, their dog in the fight is they can't get the Peninsula Road, the poor buggers, unless they go over the Garland Road.
Understood.
Thank you.
Steve, what kind of formal arrangements, if any, will the homeowners association for this new subdivision have with, Peninsula or whoever else is hanging out there?
Those arrangements just haven't been made yet.
So is it conceivable that you could have a subdivision that was suddenly cut off from access to the rest of the real world?
Not this subdivision. We have access to Route 180
So they're guaranteed that by what? By a formal agreement?
by their deeds. And I included a copy of the title report in the application here recently, which on the first page of the title, they warranted the access to the Route 180.
And Elaine, is that something that the staff has verified, that at least they had permission to go over Garland Road to this plot of land? I think it would make sense to,
I haven't, I kept asking the question instead.
I would,
I mean, I can go research platted title too. I don't know if I don't know. That's a lot of time on me.
well, then perhaps that's a question for city lawyer. To take a look at the deed and say for sure that the subdivision has a right to go over Garland Road.
And that goes with the land too, right?
Actually, Mr. Burrell, I'd already closed the public hearing, so we're board discussion now.
I think there might have been some specific references to documents either at the end of or somewhere in the insurance policy that might be part of what needs to be seen by the board. Page 15 of it.
Page 10 of the Chicago Title Insurance Company, item number 4, covered risk.
And then further,
A highlighted sentence nonetheless.
So the title company is issuing a policy saying that they will ensure if there's a lack of right to access the property.
is that standard?
It makes sense to me that something that I would want to have on my title policy, personally.
Sure.
Suddenly I don't have right to my property, to access my property.
Yeah, what I was thinking of is in Schedule B. But I haven't looked at all of those documents. Most of them are, like easements to the power company, things like that. But we
Is there a
can-
utility easement?
Not on this property per se, there's easements along Garland Road, and those are
Uh-huh.
exceptions in Schedule B2.
Yeah.
They don't affect our property. We'll have to grant easements to extend the power lines.
Sure.
Is this something we really do need a finding from, not council? I'm not the city council, but
Right.
legal counsel?
Council with an S and an E. Perhaps, I mean, I guess,
Well, I guess and, you know, if we can do that, the question's been raised and it should be resolved, it seems.
right.
Usually all applicant has to show some sort of color, and I've shown that with the title policy. They took the risk to accept the defense of the access of the property.
I think it'd be prudent to ask the city lawyer to verify that they have a right to go over the Garland Road.
Yeah, part of the reason in the TRT report, I suggested reviewing the section in the manual on that is I didn't get super clear guidance from it of how far down that rabbit hole you go with the question of right title and interest. But, yeah, can give it some more.
Do we have any sense of how, I mean, as you pointed out earlier, you know, there are lots of these situations in in Ellsworth, you know, and camp roads and, you know, my camp road goes off of your camp road goes off of, you know, Bob's and so forth. Do we have any sense of how those are, I mean, is it just pure luck that we don't have problems with those? Or are there existing covenants that can be a model?
Oh,
I mean, do you understand?
yeah, I don't know if there's existing, if we can pull anything.
Well, how do they, you know, I guess the question is, how do they deal with it, this sort of issue? Or do they just pretend it's not an issue?
I think a lot of different things happen.
Okay,
Yeah, and I mean, the example that comes to mind is Nicolin Road.
mm-hmm,
And people have been complaining to the city for years and asking for the city to take it over or something. But it doesn't even seem to have, again, clear ownership or clear history of who's got what piece and who's involved. So, yeah, it's a tough, I mean, it is a tough topic in rural New England everywhere.
Mhm,
So there's the right title interest question, but there's also, I mean, there's an entire separate manual from the Maine Municipal Association just on roads. So that's probably something I should look at as well.
Just to clarify, the planning board doesn't have the authority to determine whether a covenant actually grants right title and interest. That's what a court would have to do. But our job is the threshold has the applicant shown sufficient right title and interest? That's a different question than do they have right title and interest? And so I think if we are gonna ask legal counsel to review this application in that context, the analysis is not, here is why they have right title and interest. The analysis is, has the applicant satisfied the requirements with the application to show right title and interest? Those are two different things. So,
Well, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Because the deed that we have now says the property is subject to any conditions, covenants, and restrictions of record. So if there was some easy thing that was one of those tied to this property that said, yeah, come and go as you please, that would clear it up, right? So if such a thing exists and it was provided, that would answer your question, I think.
Yeah, that certainly would. And I don't think we need legal counsel for that.
Right.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
If we had something, if there was an actual covenant, you know, some kind of document showing that states at the very least, you know, these properties have access over the other private roads from the state road, in my opinion, that's enough to prove right title and interest.
But we don't have that yet.
But we don't have that yet. So if the applicant provides that, then we don't need to run to legal counsel, in my opinion. I think that would be sufficient. Beyond that, we don't have the authority, you know, and if it turns around and someone starts arguing it, you know, about it's a private dispute. But from our purposes, we just need to have something that, like as Steve used the word, colorable, you know, like something enough to show, like, all right, that's sufficient. We're not gonna dive into a legal analysis. We just need to see something that says they have access. That's really, it's
Okay.
not, that's the bar.
And if it were maybe less old divisions, there'd be plans we could look back at, you know, this is kind of a subset of things that happened in 2016, but I don't think there was anything before that. It was so long ago that these larger lots were created that it was completely informal. But the more attention the board pays over time, the more history there will be to look back on where maybe the 2016 division had figured out a small portion of it, and then you build off that, if that makes any sense.
Well, that's why this deed is sloppy. And I've seen many other deeds sloppy like this, and it's referencing a subdivision from 2016. And it says, subject to any conditions, covenants, and restrictions of record, but the title examiner did not research that to find out what those restrictions and covenants might be. So I don't think it's the purview of this board or our responsibility to find out what those restriction covenants might be. And so I would turn that back over to the applicant to find out if there's any reference to something that may cause an issue with access to the property. It's not for us to be making that decision this evening, gentlemen.
So I think you should work with Steve to solve that issue. Any other questions from the board? What is the pleasure of the board as far as whether the preliminary plan is complete or not?
I'll move that the preliminary plan for the major subdivision entitled Jesse's Beach Subdivision 2 for applicant RPM is complete at this stage. Is that good enough?
I'm good with it, I second it.
You have the motion, all in favor? All opposed?
And that's with the understanding that there'll be some talking, right?
It'd be a follow-up to answer the question at the final.
Right, exactly.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a preliminary plan review for major use site development and major subdivision entitled Branch Pond LLC. For applicant, owner Branch Pond LLC, the proposal is to construct a multifamily dwelling containing 75 dwelling units. The subject property is a 2.6 acre lot located at 377 High Street, tax map 16, lot 16 in the commercial zone district. I'm here representing the developer.
Andrew McCullough and John Bates.
Okay. The floor is yours.
As you stated, we're presenting the site plan for an approximately 75-unit, one-bedroom apartment building in the commercial zone at 377 High Street. It's on map 16, lot 16. The lot size is 2.6 acres. The current site plan, as we've proposed it, anticipates a maximum of 75 units and parking for 113 vehicles. We are proposing connections to city water and city sewer. There is no stormwater system along that section of High Street. There are no underground piping or anything like that. We are proposing under-drain soil filters to treat for quality and to limit peak flows. Stormwater will be discharged toward the westerly property boundary opposite of the High Street frontage. After the TRT meeting, we revised the site plan to include a fire hydrant near the entrance to the site. And we created 2 exit lanes after discussion at the TRT meeting, even though the traffic study did not propose that. Most of the site will be curbed, and the north and south sides of the lot will have short retaining walls to facilitate the grading plan. The proposed building height is less than the required maximum of 65 feet. and the lot coverage is less than the 75% maximum. Lot coverage is actually about 62%. We did, at the TRT meeting, we also discussed making a provision or incorporating a sidewalk along the High Street frontage for pedestrians, and we have not completed the design concept for that yet. We didn't have time between the TRT meeting and final submission for that. We did include in our plans some proposed landscaping, and we did provide a exterior lighting plan. The lighting plan specifically will need to be tweaked a little bit, as there was a little bit of overspill onto the adjacent properties, and there was one point at the rear entrance, if you will, of the building, where the foot candles exceeded the maximum of 20 foot candles, or the intensity exceeded the maximum. The lot did have a single-family residence on it, which has been demolished. And now it's a site waiting for its next adventure.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Questions from the board?
In terms of the different reports and stuff from site plans and from the traffic guy and whatever, it kind of vacillates back and forth between 75 and 80.
And it most likely, and if I can speak to this, it most likely may drop to 72.
Oh, even lower.
So, yes, we asked for the traffic study to be at 80 so that we were
Kind
covered.
of a worst-case scenario in a
Yes,
sense.
exactly.
Okay.
So, question you have on traffic?
No. I'm just going in order here.
Okay.
That was in the very beginning.
I'll get my pencil out.
Oh, I'm ready. I got tags here.
Better get more than one.
In terms of the, and again, I'm just going in order.
Yeah.
In terms of the water pressure and whatnot, are the fire guys okay with the pressures and whatnot? Because there's
I
some
can't-
note in there that there was some variation and so forth.
Well, I can't speak to that because I'm not the water department.
Okay,
that'd be
but you're the
Reg-
fire guy.
Yeah, that'd be Reggie. Are we talking domestic or are we talking hydrants?
I
Let's
was,
talk both.
yeah, right. I was actually thinking about emergency uses
So
like hydrants.
what Mr. Bates is doing is he's having Maine Fire come in. They're gonna conduct a proper hydrant flow test, which then will have the results. That goes into a calculation that sits there and tells them whether he can meet the requirements for the sprinkler, for the building out for the sprinkler room.
Okay.
If he can't, then he has to come back and sit there and propose what he is going to do to rectify that, to be able to meet that requirement.
And what can he do?
He can put
Some sort of pump in there?
booster pump, he can put a tank as well with a booster pump. There are many different options, and that's for him and Maine Fire to figure out that solution of if that comes to that, if that's what they figure out.
Okay. And that'll be done by,
We already had one done last year, but I think things have changed in the area, so they want us to perform another one.
Okay.
And the one done last year exceeded all of
Right.
what it needed to
okay, so it looks good, is what you're saying.
at the time, but apparently there's been quite a bit of activity.
Well, I think to add to that, because Jackson Lab is going through an expansion now, correct?
Mhm.
I mean, a permanent expansion, which I presume is gonna use more water. So, I mean, when I read Reggie's letter, range of pressure from 50 to 120 PSI, that throws up a whole bunch of red flags for me. I've also known, okay, what is coming down the road with Jackson Lab? I mean, how does this all, these two big developments all play together? I mean, that's something,
So that's-
Reggie's gotta come back with
So
something.
they're completely separate. It's on the owner to sit there and to figure out what they need. So what it comes to is that Mr. Bates is gonna have Maine Fire to conduct a new hydrant flow test, a more current one, to find out did anything change from last year to this year. And then if not, that paperwork will show and say, no, he's all set, he's good to go, this is what he needs to have. But if it's different, then they have to sit there and refigure the calculations to figure out, okay, do we need to add a booster pump? Do we need to add an extra tank? Do we need both? What do we need to make this project move forward?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at though is you also have another project. I mean, and I think it's more directed towards the water company to say, we've got enough water to serve both of these projects.
Right.
I think it's interesting, like, point-in-time question, like, if both companies test pre-construction and both come back okay, but if one or the other project had been completed, then the question is, would the second test in order
Be okay.
be okay still? And, maybe there's just a little bit of a risk calculation there.
So does, I'll put it back to you guys, this other test that you're gonna do, does it address that sort of issue? Okay.
Last year, it exceeded all the domestic water as well as the fire suppression.
Are having these issues, just so you're aware before you go start getting into your project and you find out that you're gonna need this. We wanna catch it before the building actually starts going up, so that way we can correct any issues that we can while we still have the time.
Sounds reasonable to me.
We're just gonna race the Jackson Lab, see what happens.
There you go.
They've got a little bit more
I'll
capital.
let that can be a private offline to the
That's all right.
discussion.
And if I can add a little thing, the council approved recently, funds for a study of the water system in that area. So, there may be improvements forthcoming depending on what that study finds.
Because I mean, not that, we have another project in Lynn's that they don't have standing yet, but I mean, we've seen a sketch review of 130, 140 lot
Oh, right,
subdivision.
the other side,
So
yeah.
I mean, they're here first, they have standing,
And, yeah.
but it goes to what Elena just said, that, that whole area has some
Well,
water issues.
there's two separate sides. So that other units, those housing is on a whole separate line and a whole separate pump house. Versus up on top of the hill is serviced by the one behind China Hill that services everything up from Walmart up towards FW Web up in that area. So two separate areas of concern here.
Okay.
Next.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so, and I've mentioned this before, I don't know whether it's been to you guys or not, but I'm looking at the stormwater management plan.
Yes.
And you have just a ton of calculations, I would really appreciate that. But you're talking about 2.7-inch rainfall event and a 5.4-inch rainfall event, which is, I think, consistent with our standards. My question is this, how long have those standards been our standards? Is it like
2012?
I was gonna say maybe 10 years.
10 years? Okay.
And they're higher than what the state.
We had gone from 4.9 in 2012 to 5.4.
Okay. And then, so that's what you're taking now?
So that's what.
So how often do these state standards or wherever
Well,
get changed?
Honestly, if I can,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
I,
please.
I do not believe the 4.9 had changed since the 1960s.
Okay.
I believe that when they developed the TR20 model, I believe that for this vicinity and this type of rainfall event, I think it had been 4.9 on the 25-year storm event straight through to 2012. So, then at that time, Michelle, got rid of saying, we're gonna deal with the 2 and the 25, and we're gonna say the 2.7 and the 5.4. And I think that information came from,
Like, she was ahead of the state.
she was at that time, I believe, ahead of the state. I think it came from a Cornell study, a Cornell model. And I know I have a reference to it somewhere, but Cornell is one of the places that have done a lot of work on
Updating that sort of thing.
updating that kind of thing.
So this is at a minimum, it's a really good current thing.
It's a good current thing. For this, and, you know, we could debate for hours. For this type of development, let's say, for this scale of development, the DEP only looks at quality. They only look at treating that first inch of rainfall off impervious surfaces and the first 0.4 inches of rainfall off other landscape surfaces. So the DEP in 2006, I believe it was, for sites under 3 acres of impervious, they got rid of saying, you've got to demonstrate that you're meeting the 2, the 10, and the 25 after development. We want you to cool down the water, remove heavy sediments, and treat it quality-wise, and then release it. So in Ellsworth, and sometimes other places, we have to come up with a plan where these underdrain soil filters not only provide the treatment, because that's what the ordinance requires, but we also have to provide capacity to store it, enough of it, so that then those peak flows hit.
Well, I like that explanation.
Thank you.
Can I go on my next one?
Certainly.
Okay, got another one, okay.
You're on a roll.
All right, yeah, well, whatever. On one, somewhere in this morass of calculations that you've presented us, which I waded through with great diligence, you talk about the infiltration model as exfiltration of 0.8 inches per hour. I assume that that's in the little pond in the back? Is that where that assumption is good?
So, HydroCAD, which is what I use for these
Right.
models, which most
I
people,
recognize it.
yeah, which most people use. HydroCAD has an option for exfiltration. They don't have, at least in my version, something for infiltration.
Okay,
So I calculated the correct infiltration quantity going through the filter, down through the soil filter, into the pipes underneath. I'm calling it exfiltration. It's actually infiltration going down.
okay.
So it's just the way to make the model work by calling it that. But
Okay.
it's infiltration down through the soil filter.
Is the infiltration assumption that's here, like this 0.8, is that, what is that subject to?
Okay.
To get to that number?
The DEP has standards for how much water they want passing through that filter per hour.
Right,
And so they've come up with these gradations that allow for that. So I calculated that backwards to get to the 0.8 inches per hour.
So is that 0.8 affected all by things like snow cover and stuff like that, or is it all, or not? I mean, this is the infiltration at the bottom of the pond, right?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
So there's
So-
some assumption about what that pond, what the
Yep,
pond is made of.
and-
The air, right?
But, well,
I guess here's my point.
Yes.
You know, if in fact, that the infiltration rate depends on, you know, what's happening on the ground surface, then my argument would be if you have snow and ice and so forth, that the infiltration rate would be much lower.
yeah.
Whereas if it's a summer day, the infiltration rate is, I'm willing to say it's 0.8, that's
Through
right,
the
no
roof.
problem.
Through the roof.
Yeah.
So how these are, so then these under-drain soil filters
Right.
have a basin at the end of them, if you will, with a frame and grate on the top of them.
Right,
That acts as your emergency overflow, if you will.
okay,
So if they're not taking water, if there's not infiltration happening, it goes over the grate and into the basin and out.
when you say basin, that's the detention pond thing.
Well, I'm talking it's a 2x2 concrete structure with a frame and grate
Oh,
on the
okay,
top of
okay.
it. Like a catch basin,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's not. It's
Okay.
it's acting as a outlet structure. But I will tell you that, and just, if I can throw out what I consider are a couple good examples of this. Global Beverage Warehouse that I helped design and permit and things like that. That has 3 under-drain soil filters there on that site. And tell me if I'm wrong, but they work like a charm year-round.
I don't ever see any water in them ever.
No, but
I think that's a good thing.
But
That's
I-
a good thing.
But
Seems like an incredible waste of real estate to me. That's my 2 cents.
well, we can put them all underground.
Seriously.
Hire me,
That's
but
next.
that, but so that's a site that's a tight site, if you will.
Right.
It's a constrained site, and even in the wintertime, I've never seen a real serious buildup there of water that has triggered the outlet structures myself. And I will also tell you that a couple years ago, up at the hospital, they redid a parking lot that they were having a lot of problems with. And the contractor called me and said, you know, I don't want all the problems that have happened here before to happen again. And so I came up with, I sketched out a similar layout to what we do with these under-drain soil filters. It looked like a fish skeleton up through the middle of the parking lot, down about 18 to 24 inches to intercept the groundwater, and so that it wouldn't heave, et cetera, et cetera. And he and I have both gone up there in the dead middle of winter and the dead middle of summer. Never seen that not running. And I mean, we have literally checked it in February after, you know, the coldest, hardest cold snaps that we have, or late January, and it's still running at 18 or 24 inches deep. So there isn't a lot of frost freezing that occurs in these under-drain soil filters, frankly.
Well, I'm not,
Yeah.
concerned about, you
Yeah.
know, what's happening in February. It's, you know, it's April, March,
Right,
April.
right.
When, you know, you have you have a potential rainstorm.
Right.
Over frozen ground,
Yeah.
and that's a whole different
Yeah,
ballgame.
but, so we do have that outlet structure acts as an emergency overflow.
Okay.
So if it can't go down, it has a place that's lower than the berm that it can spill into and then discharge.
Okay, I'm convinced. And I really like all the calculations of that. That's just-
That was a lot of
Well,
calculations.
I'll tell you what, talk about quantity versus quality, man.
That was, I don't know if John was happy with me, but that was a lot of calculations.
It was.
They only need to give us 3 copies, so I don't know.
I was just gonna say, you can eliminate some of that and save a couple trees.
Probably.
Well,
It's like,
yeah,
But you just hit print, and there it comes, right? Okay. Still my turn?
absolutely.
Okay, going on to traffic now,
Okay.
my personal favorite.
yes,
Okay, with your, in the very beginning of the Sebago, they did it, right? And the
yes,
Sebago
yes,
study,
yes,
whatever.
they did it 100%.
Yeah. There's talk about what's going on with the ADT and so forth, and that, MDOT has published one thing, and you did some counts in 2021, and this, that, the other thing, right? So there's a couple of different, like if I look at Table 1, I see something that happened in 2014, something that happened in 2017, and then you did some stuff in 2021.
Or
I
they,
get-
they did some,
Well-
or they would have done some stuff.
Yeah, well,
Right, yeah,
that's-
yeah, our consultant.
Your
Right.
guys.
Yes, our
Your
guys.
team.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
My question is, are all the calculations really, that follow that, are they really all based on the 2021 counts that were done? I mean, I get the impression that they were.
Yes.
So then my question is, who cares about the 2014 to 2017 stuff? I mean, that's nothing, right?
Right.
I mean, they came up with some percentage of growth or whatever, which
Yeah.
is suspect anyway, but that's not really ever used.
No.
Because they say it was negative, but we're gonna assume a 1% positive, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Okay. And so the counts that were done in 2021 are the basis for all the other calculations?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good thing.
Yes.
And not only that, you took them during the summer peak, and that's a good thing too, so. Let me see here. Let me just say that you counted this as a multifamily housing low-rise, and it's really a multifamily mid-rise,
Okay.
according to the ITE trip generation stuff,
Right.
okay?
Yeah.
There's some question about whether it's 3 stories and below or 3 stories and above, okay?
Yeah.
But the ITE definitions for the software that y'all are using is 1 to 2 stories is low-rise, 3 to 10 is high-rise.
Okay.
That being said, it still works to your advantage because it's actually a lower number of trips. You used a higher number of trips.
Yep.
Based on using the wrong thing, so
Okay.
in the future.
So
know.
you're safe. Yeah. Or, I mean,
But it works fine here
Yeah.
because it tends to be a conservative, worst-case scenario sort of thing. They also used 80 or whatever.
Right, yeah,
whatever
no,
the
they
higher
used
number
80,
was.
right.
The trip distribution coming out of the or in and out of the proposed facility. Do you know what the basis for example, they said, northbound versus southbound for the AM peak period is 43 versus 57%. That was their split. In other words, what the turn was to the right, what the turn was to the left.
Correct.
What's that, do you know what that's based on?
I'll have to ask, so
Okay.
I do not know.
That would be good, because I think it's probably maybe more directional than that,
Yeah,
okay? So, I mean, that's pretty close to, 43 to 57, it might be, 40 to 60 or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that makes a difference.
right.
But it would be good to have that resolved.
What does that mean, more directional?
Well, a highly directional thing means it's inbound in the daytime and the peak traffic, and the outbound is low. Okay, and in the evening time, it's opposite that, okay? And they know what the actual directional split is because their count told us that. And that's also shown in, well, I assume a figure 1 and figure 2 in the report. One of the things, and I get that what you're saying about the turns, and let me just say that left turns out of this site, I think, are It's just such a terrible idea. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about it, but it just sucks. If it was my druthers, there'd be no left turns all along there. But my real concern though is queuing from adjacent intersections that would come back and kind of block, the entrance and the exit from this site. And, that's a crowded segment, it's a congested segment, and I honestly don't know if that queuing ever blocks where that driveway will be. But that would require some more analysis of upstream and downstream intersections, which we can actually ask for by nature of our definition, okay? So I would like to be assured that the queuing does not present, from the adjacent lights, upstream and downstream, does not present a significant problem, because that's not addressed. And maybe it doesn't need to be, but I'll bet it does. Let's see here.
I'll squeak one in here.
Oh, jeez.
There's a
You're
couple.
gonna upset the whole flow.
I know, I'm sorry. There's a couple references in here in having conversations with an abutter about a potential alternative exit onto Kingland. I know it's not committed to as part of the plan here, but I'm curious if those conversations, you think they're gonna be fruitful, or what's your anticipation there?
I mean, we had the discussion, and our engineer had met with their engineer, and kind of gone over a concept. However, it didn't benefit our site at all, and so we looked at that, and then clearly it becomes a connection point between Kingsland Crossing and we discussed this at TRT as well. It was my point. What I thought for my site would have a negative impact because of people trying to go through there to connect.
Like non-resident usage?
Yeah, correct.
Shortcuts.
And you know what will happen because there's a light there and they'll bang in there and try and cut over to Kingsland Crossing. So, especially because Dunkin' Donuts is there and there's like 6 mile.
And you know how Dunkin' Donuts affect traffic flow.
Especially at like 7 o'clock in the morning, that place would be a zoo. So, I didn't really want people flying through our parking lot to get to the other side of Kingsland Crossing. If one of our tenants was coming in and somebody clipped him or something like that, that wouldn't be good.
Okay, so it's a thought, but probably not likely.
I don't like the sounds of it, but
Well, I did actually.
Yeah.
But, I guess, but this goes along with that same thing with, not only from just a traffic management perspective, but also from an emergency management perspective, because you only have one entrance exit. Very easy to get blocked or whatever. And going to Kingsland or whatever else
Right.
gives you, a second access.
Sure.
Is there a fire emergency kind of issue, fire guy? About one, no, okay. So,
Oh, only having one way in and one way out?
well, only having one entrance per se to a thing that has somewhere between 72 and 80 dwelling units.
I think the police chief made that comment.
And what comes of that then?
They actually expanded the entrance.
Right, which I think was that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, to accommodate some of that. But they provided that we can get full access all the way around the building with a fire truck.
But what if it gets blocked?
Such
what
as-
if something happens right at that intersection or right adjacent to it, on the street but adjacent to it?
Well, we work diligently to clear that. So
What's that?
we work diligently
Diligently.
to clear it, to sit there and to get into the building.
As opposed to casually.
Andrew and I also had an informal conversation, it's kind of a dream, but like if you looked at this as a block, it's a super long block.
Uh-huh.
And the conversation we had at TRT was more about like, what if you had a driveway at the back? But if there were a public street, and we do have drainage within Kingsland Crossing, a lot of their site is taken up by stormwater treatment. What if there was a street that ran through on that side where the drainage is, work together, it would take away from some of their parking to give a street, but you could put parallel parking on the street or angled parking on the street. I mean, that's a big dream, but just another way to look at it where it could have trees in between and maybe serve as a driveway for one of the neighboring businesses that currently.
It also gives your residents a way
neighborhood
to
feel.
turn left at a red light, a traffic signal, as opposed to just a mid-block, which is gotta be better, so. Again, I'm not exactly sure what we can do to make you do that.
Yeah, I mean, our only hardship was really achieving the traffic study in itself. I mean, I mean, it took forever to achieve that. So now if we have to go back to Sebago Technics again to do another study for a particular queuing, I mean, I'm just looking at a time perspective. We already got kicked out last year because we couldn't get our utilities in,
Uh-huh.
and we can only do that in the
Well, let me just
spring.
say that it should take them no time at all to run an analysis on 2 intersections. I mean, it's software.
Fantastic,
You
yeah.
plug in the numbers and boom, it comes out. I mean, that's an afternoon max.
All right, fair enough.
So, I mean, I understand that that's out of your control in a way, right, because it's them.
Yeah.
But it just shouldn't take any time at all. And queuing back from a signal is one of the standard outputs of these models.
Okay.
And if the 95% queue, 95 percentile queue doesn't reach to your entrance,
I see.
problem solved.
Yeah.
If it does, problem not so solved. And I honestly don't know. I mean, I know it gets congested in there, but I'm not sure whether it gets that congested.
Right.
I think that might be it. So I would like, but let me just say that I would really like to see queuing, some sort of queuing analysis to make this okay. Because like I said, if I had my way, you would not be allowed to have a left turn out of that development, but I'm not sure that I'll ever get my way.
I kind of want to go along the same line of what Nelson brought up. I mean, my original thought too was that cross connection to Kingsland Crossing. I kind of run through my mind, how would it benefit the apartment complex? And really, after I considered all the movements, it's like, does it get you to Beachland? If you want to get to Beachland, you can come out and take a right. That's no great advantage there. I mean, it just didn't seem like, it was a huge benefit. I mean, if it had something to do with the stormwater, if you could get rid of that whole stormwater area and connect down behind Jackson Lab, like we do with you figured it out with stormwater on site, so, I mean, I think it'd be nice, but it doesn't, I didn't see a huge benefit to this project.
If it eliminates left turns, there's a benefit. Let me just, can I ask another
Well,
question?
yeah, that's a benefit,
Yeah.
but.
You're saying it's
but it
not big
creates
enough.
Creates other problems.
Well,
And
those weren't my purview. I was talking about left turns here. Well, this is a sidebar. Why are these all one-bedroom houses, apartments?
It's a major demand. It's a major
Really?
demand.
One bedroom
Absolutely,
apartment?
yeah. Major demand in the city that everybody's missing.
Just a one-bedroom?
Yeah.
And how many, I mean, and this is just information. Are you seeing like couples then, or
Yeah,
single?
you see a lot of traveling professionals.
Like traveling nurses and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
a lot of stuff like that. A lot of people that work in the area, out of the area, that like to be in Ellsworth.
Okay,
You see it across the board, from young people to old. I mean,
okay.
there's a major, major demand, and it's affordable too. So, and we'll have
A
amenities.
one-bedroom is?
Yeah, and we'll have amenities like a gym and all that sort of thing. So, we'll create a nice environment that everyone can be proud of. It's just no one's ever tackled this demand yet, and
Because the other one that you did right over by Global and Acadia Provisions, that's not all one-bedrooms, right?
that's all two-bedroom.
two-bedroom.
Okay. So I see, so depending on what they want, you send it to this one or that one, right?
Right, it's right across
You
the
got it
street.
covered, man, okay, got it. There's a logic here that,
And they're all near liquor stores. so-
and they're all, how good does it get, right?
Andrew, I just request one thing, for future reference, if you get a traffic study from Sebago, would you ask them to use a little bigger font?
Okay,
I mean, for a, here and then, site and pad. It's like-
okay.
Oh, and the dark brown versus medium brown?
Yeah,
I mean, come
color.
on. You know, I had to hear my desk light on and all kinds of stuff. You want to make it easy for us, codgers,
Tell them you got 3
codgers.
septuagenarians, or septuagenarians?
I know, speak for yourself. I'm not sure, I don't like the sound of that. Sorry, I'm done, thank you so much.
Can I just follow up, Jonathan, a little on, I mean, this is our first big project, any kind of apartment complex with 1 bedroom.
Yeah.
So I was kind of curious as to, you know, I mean, you got into a little bit about who you're looking to attract to this. And I was, because one thing, I mean, I see, and Andrew, the area to the west where it's for stormwater, one downside, I think, I see is it's really no outside area for people to congregate, socialize. Can people go into that stormwater area, or is that kind of off? Yeah, that's,
Well,
you can't get in, you know, put picnic tables or.
I mean, you could, I mean, except the day of, and let's say the day after a storm event, that's gonna be dry. I mean, the bottom of that's gonna be dry. It's gonna be vegetated. The maximum depth of water in there, I mean, during the storm event is maybe a couple feet. So I don't think a picnic table is gonna float away or move around. It's vegetated. We could create we could create right now, I think the side slope into there is 3-to-1. I mean, we could make an pedestrian quote-unquote access into there that would be
I mean, I
more
just wondered,
gradual.
you know, from your experience.
Yeah, no, I
mean,
get
what
what you're
are
saying.
The people that you're trying to attract to this
Well-
this building.
Ca-
Oh, go ahead.
Well, can I ask a question?
Sure, yeah.
That would potentially, that we could work with is, okay, for apartments, the parking requirements for apartments are 1.5
I'll get to
spaces.
that. I've got that on the machine.
So if we could work,
I'll get to that.
okay,
But let me get back to Jonathan. Are people that are renting these, you know, do they congregate outside?
Never, almost never. Like people.
What are they
most-
looking for? I mean,
They're looking for
Access to the liquor store.
yeah, a place to go. Like we put in these nice windows, and all the blinds are drawn all the time. Like people want to go home from work and be in their apartment dwelling. That's typically how it goes. So to create additional stuff outside. I mean, understand it is a great concept, but and then depending on like if you allow pets, it needs constant maintenance because no one picks up their dog crap. You know, there's stuff that goes with it. We have a little space at Washington Lux, one of our other spots in town, and no one ever uses it. So we thought, oh, we'll buy and invest in a couple of barbecue grills so people can use the grills, and no one uses them. So,
Okay, getting back to you, Andrew. Yeah, our parking regulations require 1.5 spaces per unit. Okay, these are 1-bedroom units. You've done a bunch of 2-bedroom units. Is your strip apartment on 1A, are those 3-bedroom?
3-bedroom, yeah. I no longer own those, but.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But each one of those complexes require 1.5 spaces per unit.
Right.
And it does allow us to reduce the number of required spaces by up to 25%. So, and I was kind of looking at this, with the idea of more outdoor space. And basically just some basic calculations. I mean, if you reduced it 25%, and I'm not saying that's a great idea, but basically you could eliminate paving the whole back of that 22 space parking area. I mean, my trade-off, I think, would be green space. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know how many cars.
Well, so the question though is, with
Can be
these,
done.
with these other developments,
Mm-hmm.
are you parked up, or do you have lots of vacancies all the time, or?
In our two-bedroom units, we have a lot of vacancies. We don't see, like, a lot of times in our two-bedroom units, we'll have a couple that's there, with sometimes one car.
Now, let me just kind of go along this. It's called parking deferment, 1105.4. The administrator may approve a reduction in parking spaces of up to 25%, provided that the land area needed to meet the full requirement is retained. The site plan shall note the area where the parking is deferred with a dotted lot layout. If within a 2-year period following issuance of certificate of occupancy, the administrator determines based on the observed usage that deferred parking is needed, and such parking shall be constructed by the applicant with 12 months of being informed. So we can defer it, look at it, see how it works out, and say, it's not working, pave it. I'm just throwing that out there for
Yeah.
discussion.
I think, I like the idea, I do.
Of course you do.
I'm all for less impervious. One thing we also, or an alternative to that, or a twist on that, would be if we put down like the paving blocks that allowed the grass to grow up in between, or something like that. So it's kind of hardened, if you will, but there's grass growing up in between it, and so the water then can go down through it. Can't think of a place that definitely has it around here, but I mean, it's something that I've seen in trainings
And I
and
think
things
this
like
part of it,
that.
I mean, I think this is something good for the city to do, maybe some type of study. Because years ago, I mean, when Home Depot was built,
Correct.
they had to put in what they put in for parking.
5
And it-
spaces per thousand.
And it was like, after it was
Yes.
built, it was like, holy cow.
Yes.
It's gonna save you some money if you don't have to put in parking spaces. I mean, those are not cheap to
No, I mean.
build and maintain, right?
I love the idea. I mean, I'm certainly not opposed
So
to
what it-
creating some
what-
outdoor
So the
space.
ordinance actually says that if it doesn't work, in other words, the
Right.
parking is, the people are parking on the grass or whatever.
Right.
That we can make them go back, right?
Correct.
There is a spot between Bayview and Union Street with those pavers where the grass grows up through,
Oh, okay.
okay?
Oh, right.
But those pavers can be
Yes.
used for the entire parking lot too.
Well, they could be, yeah,
But
but
it's-
that's a maintenance,
It's gonna be tough on
You just have to
tough
mow
on,
it.
tough
Well,
on
that's right,
maintenance.
yeah. No, there's a lot of things that look good going down until you have to fix them, and
Right.
it's like brick pavers, like that brick paver crosswalks.
Yep.
I mean, that's a really cool thing, until you have to fix it, you know?
As soon as I kind of sprung this on Elaine, I didn't even discuss this with her
That's okay.
previously, so, I mean,
No, Andrew and I have talked about parking, and even months ago when it was a different concept in this site, and different options. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I knew that was in there, but I hadn't thought of it as a way to reduce it. But I mean, part of the question, I think, to pose to John is, what are you offering in your leases? I mean, I've rented one-bedroom apartments that came with one space, and you had to pay more if you wanted two. So you're not giving a space and a half to every tenant. So it depends what they feel is necessary as well.
Well, I mean, we run into the same thing with our two bedrooms, right? I mean, obviously you can never give anybody a space and a half, so your trade-off is every 3 units, But, I mean, so typically you'll find that some are 1 car and some are 2 cars, and you kind of, and that's what the city has for an ordinance, so that's what we follow, so.
I mean, if you do the math, 1.5 units, 1.5 spaces per unit is 112.5, which you did. And 1.25 spaces per unit comes out to almost 94 parking places, which is, I mean, it was almost a 30 space reduction, which would, I mean, that block there is 22. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be 25%, but I mean,
And one of the-
if you eliminated that 22, you're still well under the 25%.
And-
You know, is it something smart to do?
Well, I think they should evaluate it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, if you're talking about that particular spot, that would be an easy conversion, if it didn't work, to say, okay, let's pay
Well,
over
yeah,
that.
that's
Well, and from a
Yeah.
design, yeah,
Yeah,
right, and from a
right.
design
Yeah, no.
perspective, but the question also becomes, you know, do you, if you wanna go for the lower number, do you take them off the front of the building? You know, and make it a nicer view from the street, or do you take it out of the back, which might be more convenient to do, or easier to do?
Right.
Yeah,
But
and I was
you
kinda
just,
looking
I
at-
mean, that's,
Yeah, what I was looking at is that, okay, if you eliminate some, where would it be easy
oh,
to
right.
put it back in?
Yeah,
Right.
Well, and Andrew, with
Well,
what you're
wherever.
thinking, if it was pervious, you've got kind of a seesaw with how much stormwater treatment like how much area is taken up by stormwater treatment, if you have some pervious area, right?
Well, what I think we would do is, yes, you're correct. But if we were to, it's not going to hurt us in it from a design standpoint to put in more green space and keep the same stormwater system. So then if the need arises, if it is determined that it's necessary, we're not redoing something from a stormwater
Right.
standpoint.
right, no, I think,
From a
yeah.
grading standpoint, in the back, you know, we could eliminate some parking, maintain pretty similar grading pattern, but yet have more green space, and then, yeah, you know, you're basically then just taking away the topsoil and the material underneath is there, and you build up off of it.
I can imagine a croquet court back there. Right?
There you go.
It's probably level enough that it probably could be a croquet court.
Withdrawn, croquet court.
Well, one of the things that we discussed too at TRT as well, what we haven't mentioned, is that even if we don't connect with Mr. Trott's lot on Kingsland Crossing with vehicles, we'd probably do it via pedestrian. You know, we'd have a pedestrian access.
Oh,
on the
for
back.
sure, that'd be great, yeah.
And I don't think he'd be opposed to that. And then that would give pedestrians this area back here to, you know, do whatever, congregate, maybe put some barbecue grills or whatever. Then if he intends on doing a retail strip there, which I guess is what he might do, they could walk directly back there as well. And have access to Kingsland Crossing.
I mean, I guess I would ask Tom, like looking at the site map, if you took that grassed in that 22 lot, in the upper right corner, past that landscape, you know, block that off so the fire truck couldn't go around the back, but you still have the access through where that big 113 is. You see what I mean?
Yeah, the fire truck can still
So,
have
I mean,
access.
Yeah, if you look on your other map there, he shows the fire truck for both to go on in between and up above.
Right.
If he eliminates this parking area here, it's not going to affect us at all.
Okay.
He probably will end up happening is he'll probably see that he'll move it back a little bit to give us a little more wiggle room on the corner to make that turn. But other than that, it should be perfectly fine.
I mean, I was pretty sure that what it was, because, I mean, you have access through both of those lanes in the parking area.
Yeah.
I just wanted to double check with you.
Have you considered where you're gonna put your snow removal? I hate to think about that.
Yeah, there's one plan. Maybe it got turned off by accident, but back where it says M16, lot 16,
Yep,
that kind of open space right there,
okay.
would be snow storage.
We're not gonna have any snow anyway, so.
Yeah, right now, right?
It'll be rain.
It's hard to store up rain though in a flat area, in my experience.
I'm just kind of curious, Andrew, on the High Street side, you have a landscape buffer, I guess about 10 feet wide. And
Yes.
then kind of a long elliptical area before the parking
They,
places, is that?
they
all
are
grassed
they are
area?
small under drain soil filters.
Oh. And that'd be all a grassed area?
Yeah, it would be grass. Now, and this is something that was discussed at TRT, is, and frankly, we haven't really gotten into coming up with a plan for it yet, but a sidewalk was discussed along that section, along the front Route 3 or High Street frontage. So, we committed to looking at that option.
Good.
There would be no connection to another sidewalk. There's no other sidewalks up there in that vicinity.
Someday there will be.
Someday there will be.
Hopefully.
But if you don't do it, it won't.
Right,
Be the
of course.
leader.
So if we do that, we may be in a situation where our landscaping along the street becomes something a little bit more like what was done up at or over at in front of Mattress Firm, the old town auto site, where there's actually landscaping inside the underdrain soil filters. Some of the trees and things are inside them. So I don't know that we're gonna have 10 feet there to have a landscape buffer as we've shown it if we do a sidewalk.
Right.
So we might have to be a little bit more creative in providing some landscaping across the front of that. Similar to what they did.
Right.
I mean, if that's, I'm just saying that that's, I think, what makes sense from my standpoint, if that makes sense to you.
Well, long-term, the sidewalk is good.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's gonna cost us a lot more money, but I think it's definitely, I mean, I'm all for it, for putting a sidewalk there. And then that'll hopefully entice people to connect at some point. I mean, cause we all look at the forest through the trees on this. This whole triangle is gonna be pretty, as you were saying, there's a lot going on. And if we can have some pedestrian activity to connect to all these would be
It might
ideal.
encourage other people to, you know,
Yeah.
if you put a sidewalk there, it might
Right.
encourage the next person, oh, let's extend it.
I think that, you
We'll
know, what
encourage
it,
you to say you have to extend it.
what it might,
Put it in the ordinance.
you know, what it might more look like, hopefully more aesthetically pleasing, but, you know, kind of the concept that they tried to go with on High Street with kind of an esplanade, you know, with some trees and things like that, although, I mean, we've tried to pick out things that are more hardy than what was originally put on High Street.
Just from a curiosity standpoint, not a review standpoint, I guess, John, I mean, the tenant, I mean, so is the rent covering all utilities?
No.
Yeah, if you wanna share that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm even interested if you wanna share what you're looking at as far as what the rent would be.
What, like cost per month?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know yet. We're
Okay.
our whole objective is to keep it reasonable. So like workforce housing is actually workforce housing, not buttered up and passed through other ways. But, so this is actually gonna hopefully service that demand. So it'll be affordable to the best of our ability. It'll depend on the overall cost of the complex and the operating costs and all that stuff, but.
But the tenant would have to cover some utilities?
Yeah, so what I think we're gonna do from an engineering standpoint, it's frost walls and footings and a slab internally. I think we're gonna maintain radiant heat in that slab on our behalf, and cover that as our cost. And then each unit will have its own mini split heat pump to service for supplemental heat and AC. So that will end, that's electric, so
Yeah.
they cover their electric bill, and that's included in.
Are there some accessible units in this?
Yeah, they'll have to be. yeah.
There will be a certain percentage
But we don't know where.
on the first floor.
At this point. But on the first floor.
Yes.
And so there'll be accessible parking that's near the accessible entrance?
Yeah, I mean,
accessible housing?
we've come up with the correct number of accessible spaces.
And that's just a percentage?
That's a
rule of thumb.
percentage, right, 1 per 25.
I'd love to see the city work its way towards being able for a developer to do more than a 3-story building. I understand that once you get past 3 floors, you get into elevators and additional fire costs and stuff, but, it just seems like we're missing, instead of building out, build up. I think this would be an ideal place for, you could cut down the footprint. If you went 6 stories, you could cut down the footprint in half, but obviously that's not something we can do.
Why not? What do you mean?
Well, I think just from a cost standpoint,
Like having a minimum building height?
well, no, I think
Just allowing a higher building.
instead of this
65
building
feet.
being 3 stories, spread out,
Yeah.
however many square feet it's gonna cover, go up 6 stories, but, that entails additional costs of elevators, and I'm sure there's probably additional fire regulations that cover that, but I think the city's missing out that
Yes.
part of housing.
Yeah. Elena had just mentioned, well, it is 65 feet, which would allow you for probably one more level if, because you have a generous floor truss in between there too. So you get one more level out of that, potentially. But then once you go over 3 stories, you have a whole nother level of type X fire rating on the exterior.
It's a different type of
Yeah,
construction.
so if we could get 4 levels, sure, then it makes sense, because then you could offset that ridiculous cost. But you can't with 1 level.
Yeah.
Is what and so I see his point, and she's saying it's 65 feet, so you can go up another level, likely, maybe 1 more without,
Well,
if you still want a pitched roof.
It all works together too, right? So like out here maybe isn't the best place, but if it's downtown where there are sidewalks and you can walk and the
Right.
parking
Yeah.
requirements are lower and you can get more units on the land,
Right.
your return, maybe, at some point, your return in construction costs.
And I think that's what John's saying, because they're still limited downtown, even at 65 feet,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Another thing,
That's why God made comprehensive plans, right?
if you care, to show some plans as to what it would look like.
Yeah.
It's not part of
Yeah.
our review, but just, I think we're interested in what it looks like and.
I've been down that road a few
Oh,
times.
yeah. Mike, you must have something.
Not really. Tom and I have talked about it a little bit, but staff is going to be doing some studying on this. They're trying to get some issues concerning all the way around the building, so I'll let him deal with that with you guys.
Any? Pat? Okay, I will open the public area. If anybody would like to make a statement or ask a question, please identify yourself.
My name is David Bender. I'm a budding property owner. Have been there since '94. I think I heard the gentleman say they were going to put fences on the north and the south side of the property. Is that correct?
Not fences, short retaining walls,
Say again?
short retaining walls,
Made out of
probably precast concrete block.
short, meaning 3 feet, 4 feet?
The retaining walls are pretty much 2 to 3 feet. So we're trying to come up, I did not shoot specifically the elevation of your finished floor into relation to this finished floor. The finished floor on this side, I believe, is gonna be lower, but we want to come up some from what the elevation of the road is in front of this property. Kind of similar to what you, well, you kind of came straight in, basically, but we want to get up a little bit to make our grades all work together. Yes.
The other question is that there is, over the years, there has been tremendous amount of water runoff coming down off of the hill. And every year, when there's a really large amount, that property next door to me, which you guys are developing, always had one huge, great big puddle there. And it sat there for maybe 2 or 3 days, and then of course it disappeared, so.
And you, yeah, you're 100% correct. And so what we've done is, and we may have to do some tweaks with putting in a sidewalk, but right now we're showing 2 quote-unquote yard drains out by the edge of the road, because the runoff off the road, if you will, right now, just sheets onto the property. And so by developing our site, it's not gonna be, but the only way to accommodate that is to collect it, even though, how do I wanna say? It is factored into our calculations. But it's factored into our peak flow calculations. It's not factored into our quality calculations. We're not treating, well, we kind of are, but we're not technically treating that. We're not counting that as our impervious. We're counting it as impervious, and we've come up with a way to manage it. We've got 2 yard drains out at the edge of the road. One between the proposed driveway and then your entrance, where that wet area was after a storm event, and then one down further toward Blueberry Hill, if you will, or up further, going north, where it did sheet off again, and trying to collect it into those yard drains as it runs down the edge of the road, so that then it can follow out through our system and then away.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, Jennifer Montague. I also am partnership to the budding land. The question on traffic, I can answer you because I'm there every day, pretty much Monday through Friday, between 8:30 and 6:30. And in the summer months, we pretty much call that the Bar Harbor backup. There will be bumper-to-bumper traffic there, you know, starting typically, I would say around 11 in the morning, right up until 6:30 in the evening. And a lot of times from people I have talked to that have been in that traffic, say they, you know, they experience it all the way down from the McDonald's light all the way up past, you know, once they hit Global Beverage and light and then they hit the Martin's light, it clears out more. But there will be a lot of traffic no matter what.
Standstill?
Yeah. Yeah. You can, I mean, typically you're at the mercy of the lights, so depending on how long the light is and where you are in line. But you could potentially probably sit there, you know, maybe from the Darlings light to the Global Beverage light. I would say maybe 6 to 8 minutes, depending on the schedules of the lights and whatnot. Turning left out of there, especially during the months of May, June, July, August, maybe a little bit into September are very hard. You could potentially sit there for quite a long time trying to get left. I do know a lot of people use the middle turning lane, which has been a tremendous help. We've seen a lot less accidents through the years because of the turning lane in the middle. But I've also seen people abuse that turning lane, trying to pass cars to get ahead. So, you know, through the years, I mean, I've been there this will be my 21st year, full-time, seeing everything. Definitely a lot less accidents when that middle lane was put in. But I would expect to still see a struggle with people trying to turn left out of that property. And I'm not sure if you might get complaints on it, because it is near impossible in the summer months. I know a lot of people turn right out of our property, go down Beachland, take Kingsland, and come around, just to get going down Myrick. So, because sometimes it's the only way. Or a lot of people also go through Pat's Pizza parking lot. So his traffic could increase if they're trying to get down the hill. So all I can say is good luck with traffic.
See?
Thank you. And on the traffic lights, I'm gonna have to talk to Jason Ingalls, and if there's any issue, he's gotta do some more tweaking on those traffic lights. He doesn't think there will be, but, does it, you know?
But he has the data that these
Yeah.
guys can just use
Yeah.
and just play all kinds of things. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that we need to know.
There's only so much he's gonna be able to do with the light timings.
Oh, yeah.
The gross volume is
Yeah.
just gonna be.
Just overwhelming.
Yeah. You can only move so many cars through an intersection per minute. You're not coming up?
I'm all set.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're just here for the ride? Okay. To the driver?
And I carry the boxes upstairs.
I'll close the public hearing. Anything from staff you'd like to share?
We gotta put this at a standard time in the process, so I'm prepared. No, I mean, I noted it, but this was a very, very complete application. And we had productive TRT discussion. There's some things forthcoming, like, you know, they've discussed and we'll look at a sidewalk. So, I suppose, kind of defer a little bit, just, is there anything you feel you need more clarity on, like with regard to the parking?
I think that helps us out a lot. I think the discussion tonight was very beneficial as far as, you know, if we make some tweaks to this site plan, where we're gonna go with it.
Okay. Mark, anything?
I have nothing, sir.
Any other questions?
Not for me.
I move that we find the plan for major site development and major subdivision entitled Branch Pond LLC for applicant owner Branch Pond LLC to be complete.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So any other comments from staff in general?
Yeah, a little bit, and you do have Mylars to sign, so don't run away. I guess just thank you for, coming to the joint workshop with council last Monday. And I will endeavor to get some draft amendments before you for the September meeting. Although, yeah, that's what I'd like to do. I foresee some other projects coming forward.
I mean, how would the board be to, I suggested this to Elaine the other day, that she and I, and perhaps Richard, get together to try and get the revised solar ordinance
Sure.
finished. I think we have a pretty good idea what the board is interested in, instead of, you know, us all sitting down again. I think we can just do a small group and could, you know, help Elena, just exactly what we want in there, you know, get that fleshed out, and get it back to us, so.
For
we
sure.
can-
Do we get overtime pay for that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, time and a half.
Time and a half of zero is still zero.
Oh, thanks for the science, man.
John and Rick have definitely like put time into that topic already, and that's why it's helpful to me, rather than
And if anybody else, well, I don't know, how
who
many
wanted
can we,
what and.
I mean, everybody else pretty much works for a living.
Well, I think what happens
Other than Mike.
if you do this, you know, then you can circulate what you have before the next meeting, so.
No, and that
I mean,
way
I
we
don't
don't
wanna
have to worry
exclude
about
you
it.
guys.
Well, we'd have to have a meeting too. We'd hit
Yeah.
a
Oh,
quorum,
absolutely.
so.
Keep it small.
I'm fine if you guys want to be the subcommittee on advancing it. I think that works.
I didn't figure
Which is
there'd be
what the
too many
sunshine,
objections.
which
Yeah,
is
no,
what the
no
sunshine on the
objection.
process.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't hear what you said, but.
No, but it all
I'm sure
comes
you're
back to
right.
us for a review and
Yeah,
approval.
Right,
and
yeah,
all.
yeah.
So,
So that's the big
Question for
thing.
you.
Hang on, Dave.
And Matt was here for our other workshops, but first real meeting, so I think everybody's met him now. It's wonderful to have him.
What's your
so.
name? I'm Frank.
Well, now that that's clear. We good?
anything else? We gotta sign Mylars? but-
Move to adjourn as soon as we sign the Mylars.
Second. All approved?
All right. Nice pick up on the parking stuff. That was good. The parking stuff.